As humans, we're fascinated by the far reaches of space. But do we even know what lies below? From underground bases and bottomless pits to creatures that dwell in a world under our own, what mysteries exist beneath our feet? Welcome to Shadowland, everybody.
Welcome.
This is a podcast that shines a spotlight on stories of the supernatural, mysterious, eerie, and unexplained. Stuff like energy vortexes,
Ouija boards,
angels,
creepypasta,
UFOs,
vortexes,
miracles,
folie à deux,
time travel,
alien implants,
synchronicity.
mermaids,
It's a good one. We need to do that one. NDEs,
sex magic,
telepathy,
Nessie,
all that stuff.
all that stuff and more.
Lots more.
Yeah, lots more. And today, first, I'm Seth Jablon.
I'm Christina Callery.
And today we're talking about stuff under the ground, underground secrets.
Underground mysteries and enigmas.
Yes, this will be a fun one. I feel like there's kind of a cool mix going on here. And I feel like it's also kind of apropos. There's something sort of apocalyptic about underground bases, at least in my story.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to say, just first of all, to all of our listeners out there, we hope everybody's staying safe, staying inside.
Yes,
this is a good time to
home.
listen to podcasts.
Yes.
Just, stay in, stay safe.
Yep. We're practicing social distancing right now. We're several hundred miles away from each other.
We've been doing this from the start, though. We've been pretty social distanced from day one.
Yes. So, cool. Yeah. Crazy times, but we got some crazy stories, or at least mine's pretty weird. But
mine is extremely weird.
Yeah. I'm super looking forward to hearing. I just know a little bit about the one you're doing, but I can't wait till you get into your 8 pages of notes.
Oh God, it's epic. It's epic.
Yeah.
So do you want to go first then, and then
sure.
And then I'll go.
Yeah, sure. Why not? I
think?
can't remember who went first last time, so okay, it's fine. Okay, cool. So the theme, we were just kind of loosely doing secrets under the ground or underground stuff. So mine is pretty specific, and it's the story of Philip Schneider and the Dulce underground base. Right. So, so this is largely the story as purported by Philip Schneider. There's a whole lot of lore and legend around the Dulce base, which I'll get into at least some of that, or at least some of the central legends around it. But basically, Schneider was a government geologist and explosive engineer with a high-level security clearance. He had 17 years of experience working on black budget projects at the underground bases at Area 51, S4, and Los Alamos. So I'm just disclaimer right here. I'm not a journalist. I'm not going and checking this stuff. So I'm taking a lot of this at face value from Philip Schneider himself. He did give some lectures and stuff, and there's a lot sort of written about him in his time. So definitely not going out there and fact checking this stuff, but this is the sort of, the story as it goes. Okay. So Schneider says that he helped build underground bases, including Dulce, where, according to him, a violent confrontation occurred that took the lives of over 60 government agents and workers in August 1979. So at some point in the 90s, he started talking about this. And at that time, he stated that there were about 131 active underground military bases, 1,477 worldwide. He said the ones in the United States were all connected by underground railway, including Dulce, New Mexico, where the story takes place. So for those who don't know, Dulce, New Mexico is a southwestern town located right on the Colorado-New Mexico border. And it's purported to be home to an underground military base, right? There's lots of conspiracy theories swirling around it. I think I think Jesse Ventura, didn't he have like some show about conspiracy theories or something, like conspiracy theories with Jesse Ventura? Anyways, he goes out to one.
That sounds right.
He didn't go to Dulce. He did some stuff on it, but I remember he went out to some FEMA bunker and like try to get into it and get a tour and stuff. But there are, we know that there's underground bases out there, right? Like military. There's a FEMA underground base for emergencies and stuff like that. But there's a lot of lore, legend, and conspiracy theories surrounding the number of them and just what's going on in them. Dating as far back as the 1930s, there have been claims and conspiracy theories surrounding Dulce, as well as being a sort of a hotbed for UFO activity. Okay, so Schneider says that once the secret Los Alamo base was once home to, this is true. That area was actually home to the scientists that built the nuclear bomb. So he purports that it's actually connected to Los Alamos, the Dulce base, right? So that, I guess in Los Alamos, there's still, I think there's still some like radiation there, and it's like kind of a crazy place, but there was like scientific experiments, nuclear experiments that were happening earlier in the century. Okay, so now he was at some point conscripted to help excavate a base underneath Dulce. So he said there's an existing base there, and he was actually hired to help excavate underneath it to extend it, basically, or create a new base under it. So he said he was immediately suspicious when he descended to check rock samples. That was part of his job, was to like help. They would blow holes and then sort of excavate, and he would go down and check these samples. And he said when he did that,
what was he checking for?
Like, I don't know, geology stuff. I don't know, like what type of rock is that. I don't know what he's doing. He was a geologist, and he was also an explosive. Okay. So it had something to do with that, right? Probably like, how dense is this rock, or what, like what are we going to need to blow it up? I don't know, whatever geologist guys do. He said when he got down there were a number of Green Berets at the geologist camp. So he said at one point he was put into a basket, which I'm assuming this is some kind of elevator, right? Like if you're working
a basket.
Basket, yeah. I think it's like
a big Easter basket.
I hope so.
The ribbon.
Yeah. No, I think it's something like like an elevator, basically, right? Like probably like more of like a makeshift style elevator where you're going down like in a mine shaft or something.
Got it.
Okay, so he descends further, and he says as soon as he gets out, he finds himself in an underground cavern that they've accidentally made their way into. And he says this underground cavern is populated by 7-foot tall gray aliens. And he said there was this horrible stench to the place. So he panics and goes
Did he describe it?
The stench? He just he didn't use a lot of descriptive language, but it was more like he was emphatic about how awful it smelled, right? Just like he was like the worst smell you could possibly imagine, like garbage.
Well, these aliens are not showering.
Yes, definitely. Yes, sweaty under the earth. So he panics, right, and goes for his sidearm. And he said he's wearing this like protective suit, so it's like hard to get out. But he manages to get he has a revolver or something, and he shoots 2 of them. And he said a third is standing there. It waves its hand over its abdomen as if kind of like it's rubbing its stomach. There's like some sort of box attached to it. And he says this blue beam hits him and slices him open. It cuts straight through his clothes, burning off part of his foot and severing part of his hand. Which he still bears these scars. So if you see him in like a video or something, he does have like part of a hand, and he's got this huge gash down the middle of him. And so something definitely happened.
So he actually has some kind of injury.
Yes, a pretty severe one. And so he said he's losing consciousness, right? So he says one of the Green Berets shoves him back into the basket and sends him up. And he said that Green Beret lost his life in the exchange. So this is in his words. I was involved in building an addition to the deep underground military base at Dulce, which is probably the deepest base. My job was to go down the holes and check the rock samples, and I recommended the explosive to deal with the particular rock. As I was headed down, we found ourselves amidst a large cavern that was full of outer space aliens, otherwise known as large grays. I shot 2 of them. At that time, there were 30 people down there. About 40 more came down after this started, and all of them got killed. We had surprised a whole underground base of existing aliens. Later, we found out they had been living on our planet for a long time, perhaps a million years. This could explain a lot about the theory of ancient astronauts. So there's a lot there. Like when you listen to him talk, like he's got a lot. He's got a
Whoa.
lot to say. It's hard to separate all the sort of like he's definitely part of the early, probably what were the precursors of the Disclosure Project, but he's definitely steeped in a lot of the sort of mythology around these things.
Okay, so for people, including me, who don't know what the Disclosure Project is.
Oh, it's a group of scientists, former Secret Service and CIA and engineers that worked for the military during the 80s and 90s who say they worked on reverse engineering alien technology, and they were told that that people weren't ready to hear about it because of the Cold War or something like that, that it was secret. And then once the wall came down, a lot of these scientists were like, well, wait a second, you said that we were, keeping this secret for this reason. And so now they've started a project called the Disclosure Project, which is, an attempt to get the government to disclose what they know about aliens, UFO activity, and any relationships we have with them. And so there
Okay,
was
got it.
there was a
All
bunch
right.
of
I didn't realize that
symposiums.
was what it was called. Okay.
Yes, there's a whole lot there. Okay. So where was I here? So yeah, in the video recount, you can actually see these scars on him. He said the government never told them of the threat. He says there is a war under there, and it's been going on since that time. So for many years after this, Snyder became an outspoken advocate for government disclosure. He believed that the government was actually trying to silence him, and he said that there were 11 attempts made on his life. So this all culminates to
By the government,
by the
not
government.
aliens. Okay.
No, by the government. On January 16th, 1996, he was found mysteriously dead in his apartment. He was strangled to death with a hose or a wire. There's sort of conflicting accounts there, but his official cause of death was suicide, although many believe he was murdered. 7 months prior to his death, Schneider did a lecture on this and on the forces he said that he had discovered in Dulce. So there's a number of reasons why many, including some of his friends, believe that he did not kill himself. So here's a list of them. There was no suicide note. A quote from one of his friends, Philip always told his friends and relatives that if he ever committed suicide, you would know that he had been murdered. From a number of sources, including his taped lectures and statements to his friends, borrowing a 9mm gun, he said that he felt threatened and in danger of his life. All of his lecture materials, alien medals, higher math books, and photographs of UFOs were all taken from his apartment, while everything else was left there.
Okay, so basically, when his body was discovered, there were things missing.
There were things missing from his apartment, specific to his sort of UFO lectures and activities, right? Meaning they didn't rob the place. Apparently his wallet was still there, cash, jewelry, things like that. Okay. And then lastly, no coroner ever came to his apartment after his body was found, which, according to where I read this, was not with in alignment with Oregon law, and a police investigation never took place. So, who knows exactly what happened, right?
Weird.
Yeah, pretty weird. It's, he's a pretty
What are the
interesting guy.
theories?
What's that?
What are the theories?
Well, I mean, in some of these lectures, he talks about having been pursued by, he didn't know what it was, but some type of, government agency. I don't know if it was like Men in Black type people or CIA type people, but he said he had some former FBI agent that was helping protect him, But the theories are that he was definitely murdered to silence him, because he was one of the first people to really get out there. Like I said, this is before the Disclosure Project, and he was one of the first people to actually get out there and really talk about this stuff. Since then, other people have come forward through the Disclosure Project, including the former War Minister of Canada. He's actually part of the Disclosure Project, and I think he was on C-SPAN at one point, and he talks about, he said when he left office, and I think this was like late 90s or something, he said there were, I think like over 60 different types of alien species that were living on this planet. And this is like,
Okay.
this is like
Okay.
the
Wait. I'm sorry. 60.
something like that. I
And
think it was
are-
like
and
67 or
does-
something like that. I can't remember
Okay.
its exact quote,
All
but it was something like that.
underground? All underground?
No. He
Or-
said if you live in a major city, you've walked past one.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe we should do an episode on him. He doesn't have much to say, but he was a
Yeah,
part of some
honestly.
of the disclosure. Right. A lot of them are former, politicians, former government officials. Some people were in the CIA. A lot of them were reverse engineers. That were told
So
that,
really smart people,
yeah,
and
people that were
not
like,
off the grid types. Like,
that were legitimately part of the government and feel like a lot of them thought Obama was going to be the disclosure president. So, yeah,
I think he teased it.
he did. There's that.
I think I saw him
There's
on
a
a talk
Jimmy
show or
Kimmel-
something, and he was just kind of like, yes, that was it. It was
Jimmy Kimmel's
Kimmel.
a big disclosure guy, and he asked Obama, why he didn't tell everybody what he knew about UFOs, and Obama kind of laughs and says, "Well, they don't want us to." And then that was like that was like the kind of their interaction. So anyhow,
Whoa.
that is the story of Philip Schneider in the
Wow.
Dulce.
So there's like an underground war going
an
on.
underground war, according to
Okay,
him.
well, so how can this be happening with no evidence? Why aren't we hearing anything? Why aren't there any effects on the surface of the earth?
I don't know. Good question. I mean, like this is, he says this is like, hundreds or thousands of feet under the ground, in the middle of the desert somewhere, right?
Okay.
I mean, it's definitely not the first time that people have talked about, underground, certainly underground bases, but also that, there's definitely a lot of like legends about species that have lived under the surface of the planet for a long time. In that, what was it?
Oh,
The
just
guy,
you wait.
what's that?
I said, just you wait.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Who's the guy? What was his name? The guy I did the alien sex story about. He talked about one of his visions was not a vision, but one of his experiences was actually visiting some type of like underground catacomb where there were like multiple ships leaving. And he had felt that it was inside of the earth. So it's definitely not the first place that this type of story.
That's so
has appeared.
interesting because it's actually like it's the opposite of what people assume. That this is like these are entities from outer space coming here, but actually,
Or both,
they could be underground.
yeah, right, exactly. So yeah.
Wow. What do you think?
Oh man, I mean, I used to be so into this guy, like in this whole like underground base thing. Like, I mean, there's definitely underground bases, right? That's a for sure thing. Who knows how many of them are? Who knows what they're? I'm sure there's like ones that have been used for nefarious purposes, at least if not other strange things. So I don't, I don't question, right? Like we know there's underground bases. There's probably more than we know. Certainly there's probably nuclear ones that are just even kept, a secret. Are there aliens living under the earth? I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, this guy experienced something. It's a little hard to separate. I mean, he's clearly an intelligent person when you hear him speak. But it's hard to separate sort of whatever he experienced with what then he sort of collected in the UFO phenomena world, right? All the stories and legends and stuff sort of around his experience, but he definitely experienced something. He definitely was
Right.
privy to something.
You have to ask what these people have to gain too.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, if they
exactly. This
seem
guy
if
definitely
they
didn't.
have all of their faculties, like what are they getting out of it?
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. And so, I think that if there are visitors here, there's certainly, they could certainly figure out how to like park their ships under the ground. That doesn't seem any more far fetched than, aliens coming to visit us. So, I mean, there's talks of, people seeing UFOs under the ocean, coming in and out of the ground, mountains, right? There's certain mountain ranges that are known to have
Hmm.
UFOs appear and disappear
Yeah,
from.
close
So
encounters of the third kind.
yeah, exactly. So I think there's something going on there, right? What do you
Could
think?
be. Could be. I think, especially after doing all this research into my story.
Yes. Well, you want
Yeah,
to jump into
definitely.
your
Yeah, let's
thing?
jump
Okay.
into it.
Okay. I'm
Okay.
excited.
So, is I heard about this. I came across it and I actually um talk to you about pushing back one of our topics because I was so into doing this. And it sort of took me back to being a little kid. And I remember being in my backyard one day in the summertime and trying to dig a super deep hole that would go through the earth. And there's just something so fascinating about that
Yeah.
idea of like what's underground. What are
Right.
you going to discover if you dig deep enough? So this is the story of Mel's Hole.
I love it.
I know it's you.
It's so 80s. Like
The,
this whole topic is so
it's a
80s. Yeah.
very 80s. It's a very 80s. Okay. So settle back because it's going to be a long one, but it's a good one. Okay. So on February 21st, 1997, the AM radio call-in show Coast to Coast with Art Bell received a very strange call. Now, for those of you who don't know, this was a nationally syndicated late night show covering all sorts of like paranormal, alien, conspiracy theories. So only the strangest stories are going to stand out. Also, a side note, although Art has since passed, the show lives on if you want to check it out. You can listen to it online. It's called Coast to Coast. The caller said his name was Mel Waters, and he proceeded to talk about a mysterious phenomenon he'd discovered on his property, which was in a rural area of central Washington state near the Manastash Ridge in a small town called Ellensburg. I'm sorry, my cat is wreaking havoc right
Okay,
now.
that's all right. I'm sure everyone's experiencing some form of that right now.
Okay. I'm just gonna
Just
power through.
power through.
Okay. All right. So Mel told Art that there was a hole in the ground on his property that appeared to be so deep no one knew how far it went down or if it ended. The opening was around 9 feet across, he estimated, and because of its apparent depth, locals for years and years had been throwing trash and all kinds of things into this hole when they wanted to get rid of something. So old equipment, um, even dead cattle had been thrown into this, and it had basically been used as an unofficial dump in the community, and it wasn't filled yet. So even though they'd thrown all these things in, they couldn't see any of it.
So deep.
It was so deep. Okay, so Mel went on to say that he had a friend who was a shark fisherman who had given him a couple huge reels of fishing line, and each spool had about 5,000 yards of line. So Mel, being a super curious type of person, decided to conduct a few experiments on his own. And he started out by tying a 1 pound weight and a roll of lifesaver candies to the end of the line and sending it down into the hole. And the lifesavers thing, I didn't know this, but it's an old fisherman's trick. So basically, if the candy hits water, it'll dissolve after a short period of time. And then when you pull it up, you can see whether or not there was water in the bottom.
Oh, interesting.
So he lowered it as far down as it could go. It didn't feel like it hit anything. And when he sent it down the first time, it went down about 1,500 yards, and the lifesavers stayed intact. So when he pulled it back up, there was no sign of any water down there.
1,500 yards. So that's like 3,000 feet roughly, and like
It's
well on your
yes,
way to being a
yeah,
mile deep. That's
yeah,
pretty.
more than that.
How did he
Right,
even?
exactly.
What is
Well,
that even?
it
Line
gets
like?
crazier.
Okay,
It
okay,
gets
okay, okay.
crazier. Okay. So he sent it down again, and this time he just kept going. So when one spool ran out, he would connect the line to the next
Oh,
spool
okay, okay.
and begin letting that line down. And he said that the line continued to descend freely. It didn't feel like it was resting on anything. And as of the first call that he made, he was still in the middle of doing this. And he said that he'd reached a depth of 80,000 feet. So
What?
keep in mind, okay, so like 5,280 feet equals 1 mile. So he'd sent down over 15 miles of a line
Holy
and
shit.
didn't feel that he'd reached the bottom of it yet. Okay, so things got weirder from there. Mel said he yelled into it to see if there was an echo. He never heard any echoes, which that's strange. If something is that deep and cavernous, why aren't you
Mm-hmm.
hearing any
Right, right.
echo? He also noticed that his dogs, he had several dogs, and they refused to go anywhere near the hole. And if he tried to lead them there on a leash, they'd dig their feet into the ground. They just wouldn't budge. He didn't think it was an old mine shaft. That's one idea because, in that area of the country, obviously you'd have old abandoned mines. But he said that it was surrounded by what he described as, quote, a very lovely wall that showed that it had previously been well tended to. And it was like a stone wall surrounding the opening, and the stone wall portion descended into the mouth of the hole about 15 feet into the earth. So this makes it sound like a well, and Mel kind of intermittently uses that term to when he's describing it. But at this point, there's no evidence of any water whatsoever at the bottom, or even that there's a bottom at all. Okay. So as Mel went on, the story went from weird to downright bizarre. He said that local lore had it that a hunter had thrown his dead dog into the hole. So his dog died, and he decides, okay, this is where everybody takes and, throws their stuff. Only the dog came back to him alive. So here's a quote from
What?
Mel. Yeah. Okay. So Mel said, quote, "The story is that he was a hunter and he was out there hunting and he saw the same dog. He had the same collar. He had the same little metal thing on his collar there. And he said it was the same dog. And he says he knew he had thrown the dog into the hole. Now that's not my dog." This is a direct quote from Mel. So at this point, Art asked Mel if he would jump into the hole himself. And Mel surprised everybody listening by saying that it had actually been written into his will that if he died, his body should be thrown into the hole.
Oh shit.
S- yeah, so Art pointed out like maybe the health department wouldn't be cool with that. But Mel went on to list a few more really strange things about this place. He said that other people's dogs, not just his own, seemed to be afraid of it. Also, just to do more experiments, he'd thrown old picture tube TVs into the hole to see if he could hear the sound of them shattering or exploding, because the tubes will kind of explode. But there was no sound. And he and some of his neighbors had once even tossed an old refrigerator over the side, and they heard nothing, no sound of any impact or splash, just nothing. So Mel said the main questions that were driving him on were, how deep is this thing? Where does it go? It goes into the earth, but how far does it go before it will stop? And he didn't think the line had reached the bottom yet. There was no slack in it. And he said at this point he was up to 18 spools.
Which is that the
The
15
is the
miles of?
over 15 miles. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay. So that was the first call. So just a week after the first call, Art Bell got an update from Mel. On the second call, Mel said that he'd recently stopped by the property in the afternoon after he'd gone on a shopping trip. He went to Costco or something like that. And when he got there, his access to the road was blocked by armed military personnel. And he saw at this time several pieces of what he called yellow gear, so like earth moving equipment, like bulldozers or backhoes or
Mm-hmm.
something. And these machines are entering and exiting the property. So they're doing some major work moving stuff around there. And he was stopped by one of the guards who said that there had been a plane crash on the property and Mel couldn't enter. Now, Mel thought this was pretty weird because it was a really clear day, the sky was blue, and there was no smoke.
But this
And
was
you,
this was his property, right?
yeah,
Or
his own
yes,
property,
he
and he's
couldn't go
being
onto
barred
his own
from
property.
entering. He couldn't enter his own property, and they're like,
Right.
"Oh, there's a plane crash." So
Oh
Mel asked to
shit.
speak with
Okay.
the officer in
Love
charge.
it. Conspiracy theories going on.
Yes. Oh my God. Conspiracy theories galore in the story.
Okay.
Okay. So Mel wants to speak to somebody in charge, and a guy in plain clothes came over to his vehicle and told him that not only would he be barred from entering his own property now, he would be denied access until after this crash site is investigated. And so then Mel argues, hey, this is my property. Um, he mentioned that there's like no smoke to be seen, and the man told him at that point it wasn't necessarily his property, and that it would be very easy to, quote, find a drug lab. So Mel said that he got the hint, and he actually did have a lab of sorts on the site. He was involved in like what he described as alternative health, and he was growing Native American plants of some kind, which he doesn't really go into detail about what those were. But he said that
So they were
it wasn't
threatening.
drugs, it wasn't meth or something like that.
It was growing like peyote or something, or like.
Something, yeah. He doesn't. He said they had medicinal qualities, and he'd imported them from northern Nevada, and he was using them for making remedies. And these remedies were well known to be able to like treat people who had colds and the flu and so on. But um, these guys are using this as leverage and basically issuing a veiled threat like, hey, if you cross us, we could easily, throw you in jail
Right.
for your quote unquote drug lab. Okay. So the man told him not to come back until they contacted him, and Mel then asked, hey, do you want my contact information? And he was told they already had it. And then Mel said, and I suppose you don't want me to tell anyone about this. And the guy said, no one would believe you anyway. So Art told Mel at this point, your best protection is to be public with all of this. So, if he's telling his story publicly,
Yeah, right, right.
they're not going to do anything. So a lot had apparently gone down between Mel's first call and the second call. Mel said that in between the first call and the second call, they'd put up concrete barriers to block access to the road. Mel also told Art that immediately after the show, the initial one, he started seeing helicopter activity over his property. And he said, I figured clearly somebody out there listens to your program.
Oh, wow. Okay. So he thinks he started this whole thing
by just going, just even going on the show, like it's a late night radio AM paranormal conspiracy theory call-in show, but that somehow his property was being monitored. Okay, so he also claimed that a real estate agent had contacted him in the meantime and had said that someone was interested in making him a, quote, very generous offer for his property.
Oh, dude.
So this all happened in the span of a week. And that's not
in the span
all.
of a week.
In the span of the first week after him making this initial call and telling his story on the air. Okay, so right after his first call, Mel had stopped by his property and he wanted to take some measurements. He'd been talking about this to the callers. People had questions. Some callers had asked about the weight in the line because they were wondering if maybe the weight after a certain point would drag it down. And so perhaps he'd reached the bottom, but the weight of the line was dragging it down. So basically, he wanted to do some experiments to kind of, test this theory out. And he tied the line to a fisherman's scale, and the line weighed in at about 17 or 18 pounds. But he still maintained that, despite all of this, he was able to move the line from side to side. So there wasn't any play in it. and he really believed that it had reached this beyond 15-mile mark. And just for comparison, for people listening, the deepest hole on record is the Kola's super deep borehole in Russia, which is about half that depth.
Wow. How deep is
We
the
need to talk
crust of
about
the
that one next
Earth?
time.
Okay. How deep is the crust of the Earth supposed to be? Like, I don't even.
I don't know.
It's not that thick, right? Like, it's like.
It's not that thick, but I know in the borehole in Russia, um, I I think when they finally reached the end depth, which would have been like at the 40,000 feet
Hmm.
mark, give or take, the temperatures were already getting pretty high.
The
Okay.
temperatures, right? Because they were getting towards
Yeah.
whatever magma.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Mel was still convinced that the line hadn't reached the bottom. And he said even at that distance, the line still could be moved from side to side. I just said that. But basically, okay. So the military presence and helicopters weren't the only strange sights on the property. Mel had also talked to one of his neighbors earlier, and after his first call, and he said that this man had told him something really strange. He said he was driving out through the area at night, and he saw what he described as a beam of solid black, so kind of like the opposite of light, coming out of the hole and shooting into the sky
Oh, dude.
straight up.
So
And
80s.
I know, I love it so
Me
much.
too.
He described the color as blacker than black and said it was like a searchlight reaching into the sky as far as the eye could see.
Sorry, he said this
So
was at night or during the day?
at night.
At
At
night.
night.
So it's
So he's
night, and there's
driving
a
past
blacker
Mel's
than
property
black.
at night. Yes.
That's so bad.
Yes, it's so Stranger Things.
Totally.
Okay. So after hearing the story of the black beam, Mel went out and talked to some neighbors about the hole. And an elderly neighbor there in the area told him that there had been a series of stone columns around the hole previously that looked kind of like Stonehenge, but without the stones at the top. So you know how like Stonehenge is, there are these kind of pillars standing up and then things that go across. So none of the things that go across, but basically kind of like there's a patterned arrangement of these stones. Okay, so Art doesn't hear from Mel for a while. In fact, it's several years. But the third call came on April 24th in the year 2000. Mel had learned that several people in the area had seen that black pillar that his neighbor reported seeing. So this is one of the first things that he launches into when he gets back. And they do a brief recap on the show because it's been so long. So it hadn't only been the one neighbor, but this has been something that multiple people had reported seeing in the area. And during this third call, Mel also described a strange sensation you'd get in the vicinity of the hole. And he said that it was kind of like when you look up at the moon at night and you're outside and you see it and you're kind of surprised by it. So it sounds like sort of a feeling of awe, like an awestruck state.
Yep.
And in the meantime, in between the second and third call, Mel had actually moved to Australia and back, courtesy of what seems like the government. Okay, so this is
Wait, what?
story. The story just keeps going down and down and down, and getting weirder and
Down
weirder.
a rabbit
And
hole. No pun intended.
absolutely, yeah. Okay, so here's a direct quote from Mel. He said, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and it had to do with me going to Australia. So Mel basically had wanted to go to Australia, and he'd kind of mentioned this in the previous call. He wanted to continue his research into these medicinal plants.
Or
So
look
he
for the
said,
other side of the hole, maybe. No, let's check.
yeah, I don't know. Good question. He also has a love for wombats, which we'll get
Wombats.
into.
Okay.
Wombats, yeah. Okay, so anyway, he said they put together a, quote, very interesting package and a very interesting lease on the land to this party. And it was leased in perpetuity, so for the remainder of his life, supposedly. And he said they gave him $250,000 a month. A month to lease his property.
Oh my God.
Yes. Okay, so Mel said, I accepted their offer, which is like, duh. And he said, I was to leave town. I was told to leave my car and wait at the rest stop outside of Ellensburg. I was taken to the airport and taken to San Francisco and then taken to Australia. I left the country. I had my 2 dogs with me. And he said that it was like a streamlined process. So basically, there was already an account set up for him. The paperwork, to be able to get him into the new country, was all taken care of for him. There's all these pain in the ass things that you have to do if you're going to
Sure.
be leaving. All of that was done for him. So all of the arrangements were made for him. The move was super easy. And all told, they gave him $3 million a year for the property, and he had to sign a non-disclosure on certain aspects. And he never went into detail about what, obviously, non-disclosure. He didn't
Right.
disclose.
Yeah.
Okay. But while he was in Australia, because Art asked him, like, what were you doing there? And he said he continued on. He was researching into these plants. And he also set up this wombat rescue. Sounds like he poured a lot of money into that. And he was in Australia from March of 1997 until December of 1999. Okay.
Yeah.
So naturally, Art asked him, like, what happened? How is it that he went from being well off and living in Australia, making so much money, to being back in the States without anything? Because he was pretty much penniless at this point. And Mel said, being Mel, he shared another strange story. And he said that he had come back in December of 1999, and he'd been helping his nephew move from Tacoma, Washington to Olympia, Washington. And Mel was on a bus. And he was going to go to Olympia to drive back a U-Haul that they'd used to move all of his nephew's belongings. And while he was on the bus, he said there was an altercation and a fight broke out. So it got really crazy. The transit people got called in, and they were asking questions about the situation. So when Mel got off the bus, when they pulled it over, he told these transit people that he could talk to them, but he really, really had to get to Olympia. And they said, "We want to talk to you about it, and we've got a bus here. We can take you there afterward." And that's the last thing he remembers for 12 days.
Okay.
Okay.
Why is he driving? Why is he on a bus if he's got like
He's on a bus. He's basically going. Okay,
$3 million a year? What happened to all the money? Are you
yeah,
getting
I
into
know.
that?
Okay, so the story, yeah, I know. It's really not super clear, but basically, he is going to help his nephew move from Tacoma to Olympia, and he was going to go to Olympia on a bus, not take a car, so he could just drive the truck back.
Okay.
I think that was the idea.
I see.
Okay,
Okay.
but still, all that money, you could take a limo.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah. Okay.
okay. So, last thing he remembers are, the transit authority people wanting to talk to him. And 12 days later, he woke up. He found himself in San Francisco in a really rough part of town in an alley. And he said, quote, "Bums were trying to wake me up and get me to sing On the Road Again because I sort of look like Willie Nelson."
Okay.
And at
Cool.
this point, he had no wallet, no keys, but he was wearing the same grubby clothes that he'd worn to help his nephew move. But things, of course, get weirder from there. He noticed that there was like some pain in his arm, and so he rolled up his sleeve. He looked at it, and he saw that it looked like an IV had been placed in his arm. In the skin, and there was still like a residue of tape on the arm. If you get an IV, there's
Yeah.
they tape it over you. And he also noticed that he was missing this beloved belt buckle that he'd made out of a silver fork and a stash of old. This is so many things. I'm sorry. You can see why I
So
have
detailed.
you can see why I have 8 pages
Yeah,
of
yeah,
notes. Yes, okay. So there a stash of old. Basically, he'd made a belt buckle out of a silver fork, kind of bent over, and a stash of old dimes found in his yard. More on this later. I'll get back to it.
Okay.
I'll circle around. He'd sold them at a farmer's market. So he was a man of many talents.
Sounds like it.
But perhaps strangest of all, when he woke up, he said that all of his back teeth had been removed. No molars, top or bottom. And he was still bleeding from the back of his mouth, so he could taste blood.
From them
Okay.
being removed.
from them being removed. Okay, so this is also really strange. When all of this happened, right before it occurred, right before that, he blacked out, Mel had been scheduled while he was back in the States to make another call to the Art Bell show. And Bell had done a promo for it, kind of teasing, hey, Mel's going to
Mm-hmm.
be on, talking about his hole again.
Yep.
Okay, so when Art pressed him on what happened to all the money, Mel said that he created a facility for wombats, and the majority of it had gone to that. So he's got a real, like,
At least he
a
did
heart
something
for
good with it. Yeah.
wombats.
Yeah.
He did some good, yeah. And he sounds like the kind of
Yeah.
guy, he's making belt buckles out of, you know, old dimes and forks. Sounds like money isn't really,
Yeah, his
it's not
thing,
that
right?
important to him,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he also said that he'd found out that some legal action was taken against him by his former wife. He was divorced because he'd violated some conditions. She'd basically been leasing the property to him, and he had subleased it out to these government agents.
Oh,
And
he didn't even own it actually.
right, he didn't
I
even own
see.
it.
Okay.
And because of the modifications they'd made to it, he was in violation. I guess they'd paved it and done different things to it. So his former wife was officially dealing with the lessees at this point. So he was kind of out of income. Okay, so here's another quick weird detour. This is back to the dimes and the belt buckle.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Stay with me.
I'm with
It's
you.
worth it. Okay. So, when he was back in the Ellensburg area, he said that he ran into a man who was wearing the same belt buckle that he'd lost. And Mel told Art in his fourth call that he'd made 10 of these belt buckles and sold them at a local farmer's market and decorated them with several coins. And one of the coins was a dime. And he had gotten these dimes because he had found a stash of them in, like, kind of a Chinese New Year pouch in his yard on his property somewhere.
Okay.
Okay, so he and the guy are looking at the belt buckle. He's like, hey, I made that. Cool, you bought it from the farmer's market, whatever. And they noticed that the dime had a date of 1943 on it, which Mel said it was impossible because Roosevelt was still alive at that time. So you've got, like, this weird interdimensional dime that Mel found on his property. So the owner of the belt buckle even took it to a coin dealer, allegedly, to get it looked at, and the coin dealer said, like, he had no explanation for what this was or why anybody would make a counterfeit dime. If it
It's
was a
like a
counterfeit.
dime of some unknown origin.
Right.
Okay.
Before, yeah. So the date 1943 would have been impossible because Roosevelt was still alive. So they wouldn't have even made dimes in 1943 with Roosevelt on them.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So also in this fourth call, Mel dropped a bomb that seemed to validate his wild claims a little bit. Okay. Just in case, like, I'm losing you guys with the dime and everything.
Okay.
All right. So Mel told Art that if people went onto it was like a pre-Google Earth type site called Terra Server. And the Terra Server was like a database of public domain aerial imagery and satellite imagery that was available online in December of 1997. So he said if people went onto the site, they could find aerial images of his old property near Ellensburg in Washington that were taken in June of 2000. And he said that it was really easy to identify where his property would lie because, quote, it's been expunged, with 2 white bars going across the area in the image. And the image was posted on Art Bell's site, and we'll post it on our Instagram.
Oh, cool. You got
so you
an
can
image
see
of that.
it.
Okay, awesome.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, there actually are existing images. And Art Bell was pretty impressed by this. You could see, like, he's kind of like, reconsidering when he sees these. So Mel revealed on this call that a community of, okay, just so you know, fair warning, things are about to go from super weird to, like, stratosphere level weird.
Okay.
Okay? Are you
Can't
ready?
wait.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So Mel revealed on this call that a community of Basque people who lived in northern Nevada. So I didn't know this, but the Basque are immigrants of French and Spanish descent. And in Nevada, they came to the area in the mid 1800s during the gold rush. And they've been closely tied to sheep herding in the area and neighboring
Hmm.
states. Okay, which will come in later. Okay. So basically, this community had reached out to Mel after hearing about his work with medicinal plants, but possibly also his hole. So they took him to a second bottomless hole that they knew about.
What?
So there's like yet another bottomless hole. Okay, so here's Mel's
This
account
place
of
is
it.
rotten with bottomless holes.
There's so many bottomless holes out west. Okay. So he said that this hole was surrounded by an enormous metal collar, and it was lined with the same metal as far down as the eye can see. So it's a little bit different in design. Mel didn't know what kind of metal it was. He said that he dropped a box wrench on the side on the metal ridge surrounding it, and it made no noise. He also said that they tried to cut the metal with a hacksaw, and you couldn't even dent it. So it was something super strong and didn't conduct noise. Interestingly, the metal in the whole area had heat emanating from it, but it wasn't hot to the touch. But it was warm to the point where people would actually camp out near this place in the wintertime. So it was some kind of a mystery metal, or there's some
Huh.
kind of mysterious, some kind of chemical reactions taking place there. Okay. Another strange characteristic it has is that even though it's a large metal structure, you can't see it at a distance. So, one of the older men in the area, someone who was part of this Basque community, remembered the hole from his youth and claimed that it had been there since their people had been in the area, which stretched back into the 1800s. So, Mel's hole, too, had some similarities with the first one. There's a black beam that shoots up into the sky from this hole, also. Animals are afraid to go near it, and there's similar vegetation growing around it, those same medicinal plants. So Mel decided to perform a few experiments on this hole also with the help of a few friends from this community. And okay, this is where it gets really weird. So first of all, they lowered a bucket of ice on a line 1,500 feet into the hole.
A bucket of ice?
A bucket of ice.
Okay.
And Mel wanted to see basically what the temperature is like.
Oh, I
Is
see.
it
Is it
cold
gonna
down
melt?
there? Is
Right.
it hot? Yeah, will it melt? Will it stay frozen? Um, and they had test ice on the surface, which is really smart, and waited for it to halfway melt before they pulled the bucket up. Okay, when they did, the ice in the bucket hadn't melted at all. But when Mel reached his hand into the ice, it wasn't cold. And when you held it, it didn't melt. So this ice had taken on these really strange characteristics where it was no longer ice, it was something else. They put the bucket of ice on a cooking fire, and the cubes kind of ignited. So the ice was almost on fire. And Mel described it kind of being like a gas stove with a fire around the cubes, but not actually burning them.
Weird.
Okay,
Okay.
really weird. So he said that a guy from the community took a coffee can's worth of the ice and brought it home, put it in his wood stove, and used it to keep his place warm. Because
Right.
he was just like, nah, these people are
Right.
crazy.
Yeah.
They'll do anything. And Mel said that it looked like it was doing some kind of combustion, but in a different but similar way to what we know about. And then he said that they also tried the experiment a number of times, but it didn't always take. It didn't happen every single time. He said it was like 1 out of every 3 times this strange process would occur. Okay. Now, they also did another experiment which is now infamous, and they used a winch and they lowered a sheep into the hole in a crate.
What?
I know, this is really cruel. And Mel himself said that he felt terrible about it. If you're super sensitive to animal cruelty, you might not want to listen, but it's a really interesting story. Okay. So as they brought this crate with the sheep in it closer to the hole, the sheep started making horrible shrieking noises, like it
Oh,
was
dude.
terrified or under some kind of, extreme
Duress,
stress.
yeah.
But then when they got it directly over the hole, it went silent, but they could still feel movement in the crate. So they lowered the crate down, um, and finally they couldn't feel any movement in the crate anymore. They lowered it down until they ran out of ropes, which was at about the 1,500 feet mark. And at this point, Mel said that they felt like a strange vibration on the line. But they basically left this crate with the sheep in it for half an hour before bringing it back up. Okay, so they brought it back up after about 30 minutes, and there was no movement in the box. So it's not looking good for the sheep. When it reached the surface, the box looked undamaged. So it hadn't been crushed, it hadn't been broken. Sheep hadn't gotten out. They opened the crate, and the sheep was indeed dead. They removed it from the crate, and they put it on a nearby table. Now, one of the guys who was used to butchering sheep began to dissect it. And it looked like it had been cooked on the inside. So the meat was all cooked, even though the outside looked completely normal. And this part is really gross, but just wait because it's worth it. But he said that there was what looked like a gigantic tumor that took up where the internal organs
What?
should have been in the sheep. Yeah. And Mel describes it as a tumor because he said that he didn't know what else to call it. But it's this big mass taking up the area where the organs would have been. And the guy who's butchering this sheep removes this thing, and they saw that there was movement to it, like almost like a heart beating. It was kind of pulsing and moving.
This is so like horror movie, like
I know.
also
I
very
mean,
80s.
it's very
Yeah.
John Carpenter.
Yeah.
So the guy cuts into this thing, and inside there was, quote, what appeared to be a fetal seal. And it was about 18 inches long, and it had flippers, and it looked just like a little seal,
What the fuck?
except it had what looked like human eyes. And Mel said it was alive, but it was connected to the tumor with an umbilical cord kind of thing. And he said that they could see the seal thing moving its eyes and its flippers. And then, quote, I noticed that it seemed to be regarding us while we were looking at it. Then it separated from the tumor on its own and started moving around on the table. And the group moved back, obviously, as you would. And Mel said, I felt like I was in the presence of something beyond extraordinary. You think?
Yeah.
He said he isn't a religious man, but it was in that category. So it's giving him these feelings of like the numinous or like this
Right.
awe-inspiring
Numinous, right.
feeling. Yeah.
Wow.
So one of the men suggested they kill it, but they didn't. And the thing moved to the edge of the table, and it looked like it was going to fall off. And Mel then went over to the creature, and it looked directly at him. And he said, I got this compelling feeling to pick it up and place it on the ground. And so I did it. And he said that there was like this ooze on his hands afterward, which is totally disgusting. But he said that it didn't smell organic. It didn't have an animal-like smell. It smelled like ozone, so kind of like that smell before a storm.
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, this creature's lying on the ground, and he said that it like looked at each one of the group very intently and intelligently, kind of like studying them. And it started to waddle around while looking at them. And he said he described the expression as the most compassionate look I'd ever seen from any face, from this like seal and creature.
Oh my God, dude. This is so weird. It's like hard to imagine that someone would even make it up. Like, it's so bizarre that you're like,
it's so weird. It's like,
where is this coming from? Okay.
Exactly. Okay, so some time elapsed where they're just staring in awe at this creature. And it waddled over to the hole's edge. And by this time they were kind of a little more comfortable around it. I don't know if you would use the word comfortable, but not terrified.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the way it was looking at them, and they just instantly felt that like this wasn't anything evil or horrible or dangerous. So Mel had this sense that it wanted to go up onto the ledge. So he picked it up and he set it on the ledge by the hole. And it just kind of hung out there for a little while and moved around a little bit. And then he said it made a slow, like deliberate nod at them and then turned and went down the hole.
Oh my god. Oh my god, I love this.
And he said they were all very moved and very drained after the experience, as you would be. But just when you think the weirdness is over.
I actually didn't think it was over.
Okay. Mel revealed that before his experience at the hole in Nevada, he had been diagnosed with a lethal form of cancer. But after this experience, he started feeling a lot better. And he went back to the doctor, and they could find no evidence of cancer whatsoever. And he completely attributes this to the seal
Oh my god.
and his interaction with it. He was like, I touched it, I handled, this thing and whatever
Oh my
was
god.
surrounding it. Okay. So in 2002, that was the end of the fourth call.
Okay. This is all
Ending
one
on a
call.
high note.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. 2002, Mel made his fifth and final call to the show. And he started out by saying that the area where the Nevada hole was located was under helicopter surveillance with weekly flyovers, but
Jesus.
they hadn't
Okay.
contacted anybody in the community. So obviously, like, they're milling around, they're keeping an eye on things. And then he brought up that burning ice stuff that had been taken home by one of the guys and put in his wood stove. And apparently, it kept the guy warm throughout the entire winter. But not only that, one night, the man had a tea kettle on the stove and noticed that the steam from the kettle was being sucked down. And instead of going straight up, it was kind of going down and around and being absorbed back into the wood stove where the burning ice was. Sometime later, he came home and he found that the stove had actually crashed down and through the floorboards of his cabin. It was like lying in the dirt on the ground beneath it. So he basically patched up the stovepipe and kept using it as is. He didn't even like set it right again.
Just like, okay.
He just kept using it. He's just like,
He's
okay,
"Ah, fuck it."
whatever.
I was like, go downstairs and
Fuck it.
feed
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then a week or so later, he came home and the entire cabin had collapsed and disintegrated into dust, as if the moisture had been sucked completely out of the wood, and even the furniture had disintegrated. And so Mel said that like there were different colors of dust all mixed together, depending on whether it was from the cabin or the furniture. And so obviously, he had to leave, and he went back to check out the site later, and he saw that the stove had sunk like 5 feet into the ground, and it was still emanating heat
Oh my
despite
gosh.
everything. And then he said that the hole that it had made was really smooth all around the edges, like it was changing the chemistry of the surrounding soil as it like went down. Which makes you wonder if the original hole was created by some kind of asteroid or crash landing.
Hmm.
Maybe. Okay, so shortly afterward, this guy sees a team of unidentified workers. They descended on the site and they brought all kinds of construction equipment with them. And as Mel's buddy watched, the team struggled trying to get the stove out of the ground, but they couldn't do it. And I mean, it's just a wood stove.
Right.
They kept bringing in heavier equipment. It's almost as if this thing is getting heavier and heavier. And eventually, they ended up dropping chains down and they poured water into the ground, and that apparently did the trick. And they were able to lift the stove out using several huge cranes. It's a wood stove
Right.
for
Right.
a cabin.
Right.
So they loaded the stove onto the biggest truck this guy had, said that he had ever seen in his life, and took it away. And as of the time of the call, Mel hadn't been back to the hole because he didn't want to lead anyone who might be following him into the location. So he's being altruistic. He's keeping, people away from, this community, from disturbing their life and from disturbing this location. Okay. So interesting side note, Mel told Art on this call that he'd tried to take a photograph because Art had basically been begging him to get photographs of anything.
Sure. Yeah. Especially the seal.
Right. Yeah. So Mel tried to take a photograph of the 1943 dime, and he said it didn't show up in photos no matter what he did. He also said that if he stood 15 feet away, he couldn't see it. He said there was like something about this mysterious metal that resists being seen at a distance or photographed. And he said the same thing about this hole that had the metal surrounding it. He said even though it was kind of a large structure, if you stood far enough distance away, you couldn't see it at all.
Crazy.
So, since the last time he'd been there, the Basque community said that they'd seen the seal creature or creatures multiple times. And it was
What?
like a regular visitor. So, it'd come up and visit them and be like, hey guys.
What?
Yeah. So, the community had found a way to communicate with it. The seal would speak to them through one of their boombox radios. So, it's kind of pulling a John Cusack, speaking of 80s.
Right.
And someone recorded it at one point. When they played it back to Mel, Mel said that it just sounded like shortwave bloops and bleep kind of sounds. So I'm not clear on what language it spoke, if it was English or
Uh-huh.
how they translated it. But apparently, the seal creatures issued this very dire warning about the weird burning ice stuff. They basically said that, quote, greedy and undisciplined use of this heat emitting material can and would destroy the world in a short amount of time. They were also told that there are other people in other worlds that monitor ours and that they have designs on our world. Mel said that their worlds are so awful that if we suffered a nuclear holocaust, it would still be preferable to theirs. And they're looking at our conditions, the Earth that we know is on a collision course with disaster, and these creatures who are watching us will be glad when we're gone so they can take it over and use the burning ice stuff. According to these underground seal creature boombox transmissions, the material is rare, but whenever it's discovered, it's almost always improperly used. So people just or creatures just basically can't handle it. They can't handle it. It's too much.
Too much
So the
power.
call Too much power. So the call ended with Mel promising Art that he'd talk to the Basque community about getting in touch with people at the university so scientists could actually study this phenomenon before the government came in, just plowed everything over or took it over, whatever they were going to do. Sadly, in this call, Mel also said that he believed the hole in Washington had probably been re-landscaped. So although his story has been captured, it's captured the imagination of people all over the world for years and inspired many searches. Nobody's found it, but there have been some interesting reports. So, first of all, of course, Mel's Hole has its share of skeptics. Even on the initial calls, there were people doubting his accounts. Some people point out that there's no record of a Mel Waters living in the area, but like A, it was pretty off the grid, especially back then. B, he could have used a pseudonym. Why would you use your real first and last name? And also C, I kind of want to believe in this.
Yeah. Totally. Me too. I'm all in.
Also, apparently the story of a bottomless hole circulated as local legend for years and predated Mel's call. So it wasn't like he just came up with this idea on his own.
Right.
And also, Art Bell pointed out that he'd been the one to call Mel. Mel had only faxed it in. He hadn't really been, forceful and reaching out or trying to get on the air. And Mel maintained that the reason he'd faxed the show in the beginning was because he knew Art had a wide audience of people who were like-minded and interested in stuff and would entertain, these mysteries and different possibilities, and he was hoping that someone could supply some answers about this anomaly. He said that the only thing he wanted was to leave a permanent record of his experience. So, different theories abound. Several callers brought up the hollow earth theory, which we should totally do in a future episode,
Yes,
but
please.
basically it's just like, hey, there's this whole other world beneath our own. And that it kind of ties together all kinds of paranormal phenomena, like even a Bermuda Triangle, UFOs,
Hmm.
kind of you name it. It's like sort of a grab bag that explains a lot of stuff that you hear about. Mel said in call 3 that he thought that there could be a connection with the Heaven's Gate cult incident. I have no idea what he
What?
meant there. I'm not sure what that means. Some people have wondered if it's an interdimensional
Well, that was a
portal, or
comet, right? Like there was a whole comet thing with the
yeah, there was a
Heaven's Gate.
comet
Yeah,
thing and some
yeah.
kind of UFO, and they had to get like
Right,
the
right. They were
tennis
trying to
shoes.
like, right.
Yeah, there was like some Nike.
Yes, there was in like purple capes or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. I forgot about that. Um, so there's also the like the interdimensional portal explanation, or some people even speculate, is this the gates of hell? And then there's also been some corroboration. So I won't go too deeply into this, but just real quickly, there's a man in the area who said he was a Native American shaman named Red Elk, and he kind of validated Mel's story. He said that when he was a child, his father had taken him to the site and told him, "This is an endless hole." Um, Red Elk had also seen the seal creatures, and he called them rock flyers.
What?
And he said they live in the earth, but they also inhabit different earths and move between them, rock flyers. He compared
Wow.
the dark shafts that come from the hole to flushing a toilet, like when he was describing what it's doing. And he also said that he's seen spacecrafts hover over the hole, but that this happens during the summer solstice. And he also said that there are people that live down there that come from a desert planet and can't stand the cold. And he said that they want to control us as slaves, food, and sex items. So it's not good.
No.
And then one caller from the area said that one of his former college professors had actually talked about a local hole that was seemingly bottomless. And he also added that Mel lives about 5 to 10 miles away from one of the largest military reservations in the western United States, which is in Yakima, Washington. So, also, 5 years ago, a Reddit user named calling themselves Tudor Shittier has located what looks like the hole north of Ellensburg on a Google Maps image, and we can post that on our Instagram too. Other people have put forth locations also, but nobody to this day has actually found the hole, and I will just leave with this bit of information. A librarian at the Ellensburg Library told a reporter a while back that calls flooded in about the hole after word started to spread. And the file on Mel's hole disappeared from a locked file cabinet.
Wow.
And that is the story of Mel's hole.
Oh my god. I love it. This is like my new favorite story. There's so many layers to it. And yeah, you were definitely right. It's definitely epic.
It's an 8-pager.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd heard the part about
Actually,
this
now I think I'm into
right after.
11, actually, looking at this.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's so much there, but like just I mean, it's interesting how like it kind of came back around to a very similar tone as my story, right? Like
Yeah.
Philip Schneider said that all these greys have been living there for a long time, wanted to take over, and that there was uh, um, interesting, just this idea that there's these interlopers or people interdimensional. I don't know. I mean, what do you think? What do you think this phenomena is? Let's just call it a
I mean,
phenomena. Let's just take it at face
it's just
value
so
and so.
amazing. There were other places. I mean, we obviously didn't have time to get into it. We
Yeah,
could do another whole
maybe
episode
we'll do a
on
follow up.
other,
Yeah,
right? Yeah, there are other places, that like a devil's hole and so forth.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know what to think, but I know that because my father lives in the mountains in Washington State, and I made a drive last spring from Portland up into the mountains to visit him, and I was all by myself, and it was a terrifying drive for somebody who's like basically a city girl at this point. Um, and you can really feel there's like a palpable, very spiritual and ominous, powerful feeling out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I
Um,
mean,
and 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 I can see why there's so much mystery in that part of the country, and yeah, who knows? I'm fascinated by it, and I actually I want to delve into this more.
yeah, I think we should. I mean, I'm definitely I subscribe to there's more to the, heaven and earth than is dreamt of in our philosophies, like,
Yes, one of my favorite quotes from
yeah,
you.
yeah. And I think that, there's more going on. I keep saying on the show that, the what we call reality is a little bit more flexible and not as constant as we necessarily think. And there's definitely stranger things afoot, here and on our planet. Why wouldn't there be? And if things like black holes exist, why can't wormholes or tears in dimensions and portals
Right.
in between dimensions? Why couldn't those things exist? Right? They can
Well,
exist theoretically as concepts.
right.
So
And even in just you see it in scientific learnings, like I forgot the name of the place that's like the deepest spot in the ocean.
mhm.
And it's super hot, and there's all kinds of
Oh yeah, the
volcanic
vents,
activity.
the
The vents,
vents, right?
exactly.
And they're like,
For a while, it was thought that nothing could actually live there.
right.
And then they discovered life. So
Not only
we just
that,
don't know.
it actually flourishes around
It
there.
flourishes, exactly. Yeah.
So there's like there's life everywhere, and there's forms of life that we're still trying to wrap our heads around. Like I think what
And
Carl Sagan would talk about it,
yeah,
about non-carbon forms of life, right? Like we conceive
exactly.
of life as a carbon-based entities, and we're like, oh, either entities that are like carbon-based can live here or they can't, right? We don't even think about like, oh, are there other types of entities that exist beyond that are conscious, that are intelligent, that we can't even like wrap our fucking heads around.
Exactly. And it's really interesting you bring that up because Mel, and Art were talking about how one of the theories was that, perhaps this, how the ice kind of caught fire
Mm-hmm.
and the metal was heated. Mel just assumed this was some kind of chemical process that, no one had any explanation for, but perhaps it was actually, a living thing.
Huh. That's really interesting.
Hmm.
Wow, really cool, dude. I love it. This is like literally my new favorite story. Uh, there's so much in there. Well, cool. Well, I'm glad you brought it. And like, yeah, there's so many like sagas to it. I mean, like, I'm just obsessed with these little seal things now. I mean, just the
Me
imagery of
too.
that. You're like, wait, what the fuck is this? Like, what's
We'll post some illustrations.
rock flyers? That's what.
Rock flyers.
Wow. Cool. Well, I really feel like we did it this episode. How do you feel?
I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Looking forward to the next one.
Yes. So we're doing next. I think
Gonna
we're
go
doing gnomes.
try to find some more
Something like that.
Mel's Hole
Yes.
locations.
Yeah. Totally. Cool. Yeah. Well, we got some new ones coming up, and so yeah, I guess everybody just stay safe, and we've got more episodes on the way.
All right. Until next time.
Until then. Okay.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Shadowland Podcast is produced by Seth Jablon and Christina Callaghan. Edited by Tim Kelly. Theme music by Tim Lakin.
Thanks, Tim.